Well, greetings. Welcome to another Draft Professor podcast. So it is Saturday afternoon. I was invited to take part in a Reddit slash Discord mock draft. So once that draft gets going, and it should be starting any moment now, I'll be discussing the picks, posting the picks. There may be some other draft professors stopping by. And I may load picks into the simulator. I want to see like how crazy this gets with all of the trades. So like keeping track of all that may be difficult. I believe this draft is using a spreadsheet. So if I get a link to the spreadsheet, I will share the spreadsheet on the podcast. But at minimum, I will be picking, I was told, for Buffalo. And then I'll be discussing most of the picks that are going on. I believe that this group is doing a 3 round mock. Um, the communications for this mock are a little less direct. Like there wasn't necessarily like a thread that had like the rules or the instructions or the trades or anything like that. So I'm not running it. I'm just partaking in it. So I'm just kind of hanging out, having a good time here on a Saturday afternoon. And you never really have to ask me twice to take part in a mock draft. I like seeing what other people perceive their team needs are and where they value certain players. The two places in a mock draft that I specifically look at, always look at the players that go at the end of round one. So, like the last 10 picks, like picks 22 through 32. Um, and then also look at the end of round two and the end of round three. So, here's the reason why. So, generally speaking, I'm hearing, there's between 15 and 19 first round grades in this draft class, but there's 32 picks in round one, right? So those last half um, of the picks in round one, they may not be players that are graded high or consistently for everybody. Um, it's the same thing at the end of round two. So actually, specifically this year, I've heard that there's not a lot of round two grades, which means that there's going to be some players that maybe other people say, he's late day two, that end up going in round two just simply because there's not a lot of grades that are being handed out in the round two area. And then the end of round three is top 100, right? So there's 100 picks in the first 3 rounds. So seeing some of the people and the players that others have graded in the top 100, I find that to be a very valuable exercise. So while it is January, we have playoff football games that are going to be happening today at 4 p.m. And my team is in the playoffs, right? I'm a huge Bills fan, but I'm still learning where everybody else is in the draft community. That's a lot of what I kind of designed Draft Professor to do. It's not about there's one grade on a player. It's a player has a range of grades, and understanding that range can kind of identify, does everybody see the prospect the same way? If nearly everybody has Ruben Bain at the top of the board, it's a fair conclusion that he's going to go high in the draft, right? But then there's other players like Carnell Tate. Not everybody is sold on Carnell Tate as a top 10 draft pick, right? So there's, people are saying Carnell Tate's a first round wide receiver, but not a top 10 first round wide receiver. But that also goes to show, I think at this draft class, at the very top of the class, this isn't like the Malik Neighbors year. So the first pick has came in, and round one, Raiders went Fernando Mendoza. I don't know that was a surprise. And I am going to start keeping track of those picks. So I'm going to start a simulator up. So okay. So how do I want to do this? I'm organizing my screen so I can see the things that I want to see. And I will share that on the podcast. There we go. So the Reddit group, there is a Discord, so you can see I've got a lot of different Discord channels. Okay. So that was pick one was Mendoza to the Raiders. There are trades. I'm using the PFF simulator because trading in that one is easier than on Draft Professor right now. So working on getting that fixed, but it is not fixed yet. And they said it was 1 minute per pick, but I can already see that it's 105 and they've only made one pick when the draft started at 1. So I think it's 1 minute Canadian and not 1 minute US time, if that makes any sense. And if there's any followers from Canada, that was meant to be funny, not demeaning. But I guess everybody interprets that a little bit differently. Okay, and the Jets went Dante Moore as pick 2. Those 2 picks don't surprise me. The first pick where I really think the draft will deviate is actually at pick 3 with the Cardinals. I don't think Ty Simpson grades high enough to be picked 3rd overall. If you pick a quarterback 3rd overall, my opinion is they should be starting, week 1 or 2 type thing. And I don't know that the Ty Simpson scouting report says he should start year 1 at the NFL level. So I'm thinking this would be Jeremiah Love. So my prediction for the Cardinals would be Jeremiah Love. Go with a blue chip grade, but we'll see. Okay, so they went Reese. So the Cardinals have a history of drafting linebackers that play edge or edges that play linebacker. I think, if you look at the PFF, like all the needs for the Cardinals are on offense and their first pick went defense. And that's where I kind of deviate from like what happened here in this specific mock. Hey, Halil, it is good to see you. If you wanted to hop on the podcast and chat, I can definitely send you the link. They shouldn't go defense. I mean, the Cardinals have invested so much on defense the last few drafts. Their offense is where the holes on the roster are. So, you could look at player grades and such, but the grades on Reese aren't consistent, in my opinion. So I'm not a fan of Reese going that high, especially Reese over Ruben Bain. Come on now, right? Like, not my mock, right? I'm just here to react and make the picks for my team, but definitely not what I would have done there, or not what I would have expected. Okay, and then the next player that went was Carnell Tate. So this is one we did a Titans mock last night. Carnell Tate is one of the 3 players that the Titans podcasters were targeting. So the 3 players that the Titans are targeting there, Ruben Bain, Carnell Tate, Arvell Reese, was pretty much that order. So they were in consensus that the Titans could take Reese that high. Not everybody is grading Reese as a top 10 draft pick. So that's something that I've noticed within like recent mocks. So I don't want to give him that reaction. Thanks, Halil. Enjoy the game on your PlayStation. Okay, so at this point, we're 4 picks in. Mendoza, Moore, Reese, Tate, going 1 through 4. There have been no trades up to this point. I have been told that trades are allowed. And let me do one other thing here. So I need to find the draft chat. So this one, and so apparently there's already been a trade. So the Giants have traded the pick. Okay, so I'm over here looking for who do I message my pick into. I still have about 15 minutes before I'm on the clock. And then let's go back here and pick announcement. So apparently somebody traded up to get Caleb Downs. Okay, so the Bengals traded up. So there's a trade with Cincinnati. And it was pick 10 and 72. Force the trade. And then, okay, so okay. So apparently I didn't do that trade right, so I've got to redo the PFF mock. Okay. So let's try this again. So the picks were Downs at 5 to the Bengals. The Browns selected Maui Noah, and then the Commanders took Sonny Styles. Okay, so the draft. Mendoza. Next player was Moore. The next player was Reese. The next player was Tate. Okay, and then there was a trade. So the trade was with Cincinnati. Got it. So I have to go down here. Find those two. There we go. Okay, so we draft a player. So this is Caleb Downs. And then this was Maui Noah at 6. Interesting to see where different people are graded. And then the Commanders took Styles. Saints took Ruben Bain. Okay, so top 8 picks right now. Mendoza, Moore, Reese. Mendoza to the Raiders, Moore to the Jets, Reese to the Cardinals, Tate to the Titans, Caleb Downs to the Bengals, Maui Noah to the Browns, Styles to the Commanders, Bain to the Saints. The only pick in here that really surprises me is the trade up for Downs. I don't think you trade up into the top 10 for a safety. There's just so many things that are wrong with that. The Bengals are actually kind of at a sweet spot of the draft. They're going to have a good player fall to them that's going to make them a better team. And you can't sell out for one player just because you like if a fan just loves one player. There's players I would really love for Buffalo, but I'm not selling out to get them. So the next player to the Chiefs was Jordan Tyson, the wide receiver. There's some injury questions with Tyson. If the medicals check, I think Tyson's going in the top 10. So that was the next pick there. The Giants are now on the clock as a result of the trade back. And if I'm the Giants here, I'm probably going offensive line, but they went Mekhi Lemon. Again, like if you invested a first-round pick in Malik Neighbors, I recognize he's coming off of an injury, but investing 2 top 10 draft picks in wide receiver in a 3-year span is going to leave the rest of the roster void at a position, and the Giants really need offensive linemen. The fact that there were some immediate starters available at pick 10, I don't agree with how the Giants handled that. I mean, good trade for the Giants with the fact they picked up an extra third, but don't agree with the position that they addressed. Lemon deserves to go in the top 10. Just not what I would have done there. So have Giants and okay, so we're good. So the Dolphins. This was an interesting one. So they went Avion Terrell. So they need a corner. So Terrell is generally one of the 3 highest graded corners. I don't know that I've seen Terrell go this high in a mock before, but that's like the Dolphins need a corner. That's a good pick for Miami. And the fact that whoever is making the picks for Miami loves the player, I think that's a fair pick there. So at this point, the Cowboys are on the clock. I thought I saw something about a trade, but not clear to me. No. So, okay, so Jeremiah Love going to the Cowboys. I know that the Cowboys fans that I communicate with, they like it if Love falls to pick 20. I think the Cowboys need more defense here. And the fact that Sonny Styles is still on the board, right? Oh, no, Sonny Styles is gone. So that's fair for where Love is graded. You're getting a blue chip player at pick 12. It just seems to me that when I talk to the Cowboys fans, they have 2 picks right now in the first 3 rounds. They're both first-round picks. To not spend them on defense, to most Cowboys fans, that feels like the wrong direction. The team needs a lot of influx of defense. If you lose Micah Parsons, you're going to need to have an influx of young talent on the defense. And like David Bailey sitting here, for example, for Dallas, that would seem to make more sense. So I'm curious if the Rams go Ty Simpson here. That's my favorite pick for the Rams at pick 13. Okay, so the Rams went with defensive back help Jermod McCoy. Again, this is a good pick if the medicals check out. So if McCoy gets through the combine, his medicals check out, I think him going at 13 looks very reasonable. I like the medical check emoji there. So learning some new emojis. There was a hospital on the Jermod McCoy pick within the Discord. So Anyway, so this is fun. Just going through the mocks and being able to comment. I like the fact that they bring the picks in quickly, because that makes it way more entertaining than people trying to debate, for 10 minutes, hey, will somebody trade for the pick, kind of thing. So Ravens, Peter Woods. That pick, again, makes a lot of sense. Peter Woods, going into the summer, a lot of people had him as a top 5 player. He's fallen to 14th on the draft board, or 14th in this specific mock. I think Peter Woods is going to end up going in the top 10. Don't overthink the player. Clemson didn't have a good season, but you can't blame that on Peter Woods. If you watch the tape, Peter Woods played well. He didn't necessarily move the needle and change games the way some people were expecting the leap, but this is going to be an NFL starter. You're going to be able to play him at 1 tech, 3 tech, 5 tech, so you can play him all along the defensive line. And I don't know who the Ravens' new head coach or defensive coordinator will be, but the fact that Peter Woods fell to the Ravens is something that the NFL shouldn't let happen. So, Buccaneers on the clock. They need an edge. I think this is David Bailey or Keldrick Falk. Small chance it's Kenyon Sadiq, but I think with the 2 edges sitting there, okay, they went Cassius Howell. I like that pick. And I'm always of the opinion, I want Cassius Howell's arm length to be a different team's problem, kind of thing. So with Keldrick Falk there, I'm surprised that they would go Howell over Falk. Doesn't surprise me Howell over Bailey. Bailey's got some character concerns, so he could drop. But my initial thoughts there anyway. So the Jets are on the clock now. They went more with their first pick. I think if you're the Jets, you take best available premium position. I think that is like Keldrick Falk, maybe Denzel Boston, maybe Caden McDonald, maybe Sadiq. And they took Bailey. Okay, Vikings are on the clock. Vikings need defensive backs, and they need running backs. So this, obviously, Love is off the board. I don't think they go running back here. It's too high for a center. So I think, and Downs is off the board. So if I'm looking at best available corners, to me, this is actually going to be a sneaky spot. Keldrick Falk, maybe. Sneaky spot for Caden McDonald. Also a sneaky spot for Vega Ione from Penn State. Just get yourself a solid starter, kind of thing. But TJ Parker, Kenyon Sadiq wouldn't surprise me here. Lomu wouldn't. So getting offensive line help for the Vikings. Oh, and actually, technically, it's the Lions. So the Lions are probably going to be taking an edge. And then I was talking about the Vikings there. So if I'm the Lions, this is Keldrick Falk. Maybe Caden McDonald. Maybe. But those are my initial thoughts. Okay, so the next pick is coming in. So I have pick 24. So at around pick 20, I'll kind of handicap my best available. So Caden Proctor. He definitely sounds like a Detroit Lion Dan Campbell type of player. I think they would really like him. I love that pick. So again, the two biggest needs for the Vikings don't have value at 18. So they took Mansour Delane. That feels about right for him. Not going to be a lot of corners. So I believe Delane is the first corner off the board at pick 18. So it's a good corner class, but it isn't top heavy. So Delane being the first corner off the board at 18, I'm expecting there in the next 40 picks, maybe even in the next 30 picks, that we're going to see a lot of corners off the board. So I think a lot of corners are going to be in the top 50. They're just not in the top 15. So, so for Buffalo right now, Keldrick Falk. Okay, so I'm 6 picks away, right? So Keldrick Falk is an option for Buffalo. Denzel Boston is an option. Caden McDonald is an option. So those are 3 players I'm considering. I would consider Vega Ione from Penn State as a 4th option. Casey Concepcion as a 5th option. And then some other wide receivers. I'd really like to go wide receiver for round 1, if at all possible for Buffalo. So the receivers I would target for Buffalo would include Boston, Concepcion. I would consider Surratt, and I'm going to consider Bernard. So those 4 receivers. Now, I may not take Bernard. Like if Falk and Bernard are there, that's a tougher decision kind of thing. But like I would take Surratt over Falk. I would take Casey Concepcion over Falk. I would take Boston over Falk. So just some thoughts on like how the board is falling for the picks that I have to make and learning how this PFF filter works. Okay, so Falk off the board to the Panthers. Hey, Randy, thanks for stopping by. Definitely appreciate you. So overall, right now, I think my biggest surprise is that Fanu and Lomu are still on the board at pick 20. This class doesn't have a lot of offensive tackles. And the fact that Fanu and Lomu, and to a lesser extent Tiernan, would be available in the back half of round 1 when this is a premium position. If you need these positions right now in this draft, I'd be going up to trade. There's no way to me Fanu and Lomu should be dropping like past 21, meaning that trade up with Pittsburgh, trade up with Dallas, go get your offensive tackle. It's such an important position that if you don't have one, it's difficult for your offense to function. And both of those guys are going to come in and start year 1. So my opinion. So the Cowboys went Vega Ione. And I remember Greg Rector telling me on Twitter, there's no way Dallas goes interior offensive line in round 1. And somebody just spent Dallas's first 2 picks on Jeremiah Love and Vega Ione, and the defense hasn't been addressed, which is Dallas's, they need edge, linebacker, safety, and none of those 3 needs were addressed. They went with a luxury pick, in my opinion. Okay, so Steelers went with Trinidad Chambliss in round 1. I like that. I mean, the Steelers need a quarterback, and it's going to be between Ty Simpson and Trinidad Chambliss to be QB3. Yeah, Halil, I'm with you. Both Fanu and Lomu are going to go a lot higher than they are in this mock. I do like this Chargers pick, which is Caden McDonald. And this draft is working out really well for Buffalo. So if I have to pick a final 2 for Buffalo right now with the way this is going, so my picks for Buffalo are either going to be Boston or Casey Concepcion. So we will see. Okay, so that's one. I gotta go here. Gotta make sure I'm in the right. So I need to see what the pick is before I tell him who my pick is. So the fact that the Bears at 25. So Halil, if you're following this, can you imagine a situation where so the Discord community may not be high on Lomu or Fano, but Draft Professor, we've had, Jerry Ostrowski, a retired NFL offensive lineman, has podcasted his assessment of nearly the entire offensive line class, and Lomu and Fano aren't dropping that far. So, yeah. So you guys may not like them, but on the Draft Professor podcast, we love Lomu, we love Fano, and everybody's allowed to have their own assessment, but we definitely love them here at Draft Professor. But I definitely appreciate you stopping by. Deep Bet's a 1. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so Fano went to the Eagles. I love that pick for the Eagles. And EJ, that was one of his favorite players to take for the Eagles. And then I have taken Denzel Boston as wide receiver for Buffalo, getting them a big X boundary receiver, can give you a little bit of a vertical element to the game. So Buffalo needs wide receivers that can get open. So they have to be able to get separation. And we need wide receivers that can get vertical. With Boston, you're getting a little bit of both. Yeah, Halil, I'm in alignment with you there, but I would take that one step further, Halil. I think we're going to see more offensive tackles than that go. Max Ihenekor, like I would love him, for example, right now to the Bears. The Bears should go offensive line. Skip those needs and solidify the offensive line because they have some older offensive linemen there. And if you've got Lomu available, you've got Max Ihenekor available. Those guys should be going off the board right now. I mean, look at, the Bears have had offensive line issues for years. The 49ers have an aging offensive tackle, so they should have been trading up. When they see Fano dropping into the 20s or Lomu dropping into the 20s, the 49ers should be trading up to get one of them. They have a lot of draft capital to do that. Houston could solidify their offensive line with a trade up. So the Broncos just traded up. And let's see if I can find the trade. No, it's not in that thread. Draft Professor needs to go back to school. I'm looking to see if I can find the result of the trade. It's in trade announcement. There we go. Okay. Bears receives 31 and 95. So there's a trade here. with Denver. So it's 31 and 95. Okay, so the Broncos then traded up for Sadiq. I think that's a great trade for Denver. Definitely a great trade. If Denver comes out of this draft with a tight end and a center in the first 2 rounds, I think that's a really good trade. Okay, so the 49ers went with Amari Washington, the defensive lineman. So the fact, like, Lomu's still here, right? Yeah, Lomu's still here. Wow. So again, this is a community that is low on the Utah offensive lineman. Some of the people from the Reddit have podcasted with draft professors, but I could tell when they podcasted, their evaluations were off of what I would say draft professor consensus are. Okay, so let's find defensive lineman and go Amari Washington. That feels right for Washington. I've seen him go to Denver a little bit later, so in round 1. So I definitely like that range for Amari Washington. Thank you. Appreciate that, D. Betzel. So that would be Amari Washington and Alfred Collins. That's a great observation there. So I will definitely say the admin for this mock gets his picks in when he says of 1 minute on the clock. We've done 27 picks in 36 minutes. So the admin for the mock, you have my respect. I run mocks like these all the time, and you're bringing the picks in. So I absolutely love it. So, and then Lomu is finally off the board to the Browns. So the Browns come out of round 1 with Maui Noah and Lomu. That's actually a pretty good draft for Cleveland right there. Just get both offensive tackle spots. Like, that's a really good draft. Yeah, I'm with you there, Randy. And ultimately, this is why I like mock drafting with different communities. So I definitely believe in accepting everybody's evaluation on players. One other thing that's important to me is for people to podcast their takes. So if they're low within the Reddit community on the Utah tackles, that's fine. But where's their podcast to publish their results? If the only place that they publish it is in a Discord chat and to Reddit, okay, I want people to come on a podcast on an international platform. I mean, we have Halil is in, I believe, Austria. He podcasts with us sometimes. We have Jack Brentnall podcasting with us from the UK. And we have Peter Quinn, who podcasts with us from Scotland. So Draft Professors is international. Come on an international platform and podcast those takes, kind of thing. So Colton Hood goes to the Rams. Did the Rams select a DB earlier? They went McCoy, and then they went Hood. Okay, so I'm assuming that the Rams must have needed 2 corners. But okay, it's a little different. But hey, you know, if you need corners and you come out of round 1 with 2 corners, I think that's good. So the Patriots took Casey Concepcion. So what do you think of that pick, Randy? Because I know Randy is a Patriots fan. They took Concepcion. And I think Randy would have probably preferred Brazel there over Concepcion, I assume. Looking at Romello Height was there. I mean, Howell was off the board. That was another player Randy liked for the Patriots at 30. So, Randy, curious what you think of pick 30 there. Hey, JT. So, JT, the Buccaneers, this is a Reddit. So, this is the group that does Reddit, and then they have a Discord group, and they're doing a 3-round mock. Their Buccaneers drafter took Howell. They took Howell over Bailey, and they took Howell over Falk, which I think, from discussing with you, I think maybe JT would have liked Falk better. Okay. Love the Bears pick. So they traded back. They got TJ Parker at the end of round 1. So I will definitely say, who's ever running the Bears, I like what they're doing. I don't know who it is, but I definitely like that trade down. You get TJ Parker at the end of round 1. I think most draft professors have Parker and Concepcion significantly higher than where they went here. So, yeah, Boston went off the board, Randy. He went to Buffalo. Now, they were telling me that was a terrible pick by Buffalo to go with Boston. So I can already tell you I'm not winning fans within the Reddit community, but, that's just the way that goes sometimes. So then the next pick at the end of round 1 is Anthony Hill, the linebacker, going to the Seahawks. So I love the Seahawks getting a linebacker. The Seahawks have an interesting draft because they have picks in rounds 1, 2, and 3, and then they have like one round 7 pick. So basically, the Seahawks need to make their first 3 picks count. I also think the Seahawks are a prime candidate to trade back in any round just to pick up a few other draft picks. But definitely addressing one of their needs early. So, getting linebacker or corner. And at this point, I think the corner board at the end of round 1 is kind of thin. So it wouldn't be corner. Ione was already off the board, so it wouldn't be him. Center, running back, there's not value at the end of round 1. So the Jets at the top of round 2 are taking Brandon Cisse from South Carolina. So the Cardinals in round 1 went Arvell Reese. This, to me, has to be offense. The question would be which player, and like Elijah Surratt, Chris Bell, even with the injury, taking Chris Bell at the top of round 2, there's a really good chance Chris Bell won't drop past Buffalo's next pick. Because if he's still there, I'm taking him. And then we'll figure out the wide receiver room later. Hey, Marina. So Fano, where was that? For the Eagles. Yeah, I mean, I know we have several Eagles podcasters here at Draft Professor, and EJ Holt, who podcasts with us every Thursday, talks about the Eagles need to add an offensive tackle. So whether that's Proctor, Fano, Lomu, that's where EJ tends to look in round 1. He might do corners, but you can even check out last Thursday's podcast. We did 5 Eagles 1-round drafts, and he was definitely talking. Now, on the Draft Professor Simulator, Fano and Lomu aren't dropping that far. So it's like Proctor or Ione or different position, usually corner, but possibly receiver. Okay, so the Cardinals went Ty Simpson here. I love that pick. Absolutely, absolutely love this pick. So Ty Simpson, round 2 to the Cardinals. That's a really good pick from my standpoint. The Cardinals are probably going to move on from Kyler Murray. So they're going to be adding multiple quarterbacks this offseason. You got to add one in the draft. You got to add one in free agency. I think that's a really good pick there. Panthers went CJ at, oh, did I miss a Titans pick? Okay, so I got to go find trade announcement. So the Titans doing a small trade back with Carolina. Good move for the Titans. They need to, so 235 for 251 and 383. So this would be the Panthers. Carolina. Oh, that's right. They're a playoff team. They're going to be further back. Okay. So the Panthers trade 51 and 83 for 35. And I believe that they're probably using some rules that suggest that you have to use picks in this draft. And that was CJ Allen, I believe, was the pick. Yep. So definitely makes sense. So at this point, linebackers. So my observation right now, linebackers are flying off the board. At this point, 4 linebackers have gone: Reese, Styles, Hill, and CJ Allen, all in the top 35 picks. The Raiders select Emmanuel Pregnon, and that's a really good pick. It's a really good pick because I've heard multiple Raiders people draft Pregnon at this spot around 2. So I think that's going to be a very common place. Now, Pregnon seems to be going higher than 36 in some mocks, but I don't see a world where he's dropping past the Raiders at 36. The Raiders need interior offensive line help. I've seen mocks where the Raiders take 2 interior offensive linemen. So the Raiders going Mendoza, then Pregnon, that's a home run draft for the Raiders right there, as far as I'm concerned. Halil or Randy or JT, I'm curious how high you guys have Pregnon graded. So if you guys are in the chat, feel free to chime in. And by the way, JT, if you wanted to hop on the podcast, or Randy, you're more than welcome to. I can send you the link. So the Giants went Kristen Miller. So the Giants in this mock, I want to remind myself what they did in round 1. Lemon. So, okay. So while the Giants need help at a lot of places, to me, their biggest needs are offensive line and DB. And they haven't addressed either of them. Right. I don't think wide receiver is as big of a need for the Giants from the standpoint of they have Malik Neighbors. You need to add depth, but you're better off having an offensive line to keep your quarterback healthy, in my opinion. Okay, Besantis here to the Texans. I think that's a really good pick. So let's go interior offensive line. Besantis to the Texans. So the Texans solidifying their offensive line. I would expect the Texans have another pickup coming. I'm expecting that one to be offensive line too. The Browns have gone back-to-back tackles, so they've gone 2 tackles in round 1. Now, granted, Maui Noah might be shifting to guard, but either way, I think the Browns, like going wide receiver or corner here, would make a lot of sense. Yep, they went Jeremy Bernard. Love that pick. Love that pick. That seems to match Bernard getting round 2 grades from nearly every draft professor that's covered him. Owen has a round 1 on Bernard. So Bernard is on my short list of players that I would take for Buffalo at the back of round 1. If there's a run on wide receivers early. So, Owen has, I believe it's a round 1-2 on Bernard, and you will hear Owen talking about Jeremy Bernard the next 2 Tuesdays. We're going to be doing some wide receiver podcasts on Tuesday nights the next 2 weeks. Yeah, so Randy, I appreciate that. Yeah, Pregnon definitely in round 1, and you've taken him for New England. Yeah, so, yep. Caleb Banks to the Chiefs. would be interesting. They went LT Overton. So from a draft professor standpoint, most of the scouting reports on Overton came back much lower. So it would not shock me if Overton dropped to day 3. I don't think he will, but I'm just saying I'm not going to be surprised. I haven't heard of too many top 50 grades on Overton. Now, if this was last year, Overton would have been picked right here. But his game really didn't advance this year. So with Overton, if he goes to an odd front defense, I think picking him top 50 might make sense. But if you use 4 down linemen, he might be a player without a position. While the Chiefs need edge rushers, they need edge rushers that are going to get to the quarterback. Overton's going to be more of your down 1, down 2 edge who might kick inside on passing downs. So, okay. So the Bengals went Mateo at edge here. So we don't know that Mateo is in this draft class yet or not. So this mock is being done on January 10th, which is a Saturday. And Oregon just lost yesterday. That was, I had to think. I was watching that game last night. So Oregon lost yesterday. I think Mateo returns to school. So Mateo Ugalele. Okay, so the Saints. So the Saints in round 1. Ruben Bain. So if I'm the Saints, I would spend at least 50% of the picks on offense until you kind of get the ship course corrected. So, what does the board look like on offense right now? So if we look at wide receivers, Surratt, Bell, Brazel, Lane, Daniels are there. And they went with Greg Johnson from Minnesota. So again, this is a player who I think grades this high. I like Greg Johnson. I'm not confident that he is in this draft class. I bet he returns to school. And I'm curious if they even have Greg Johnson in their simulator. Yep. So Greg Johnson is not even in the PFF simulator. So I believe he's on the Draft Professor simulator, but I will be removing him once the official declaration that he's going back to school. So I have to put an offensive lineman in his place. And is there a Minnesota offensive lineman I can put in his place? Probably not. But we'll go with Inez Cooper of Miami in the place of Greg Johnson. I don't think Inez Cooper goes this high, but I don't want to pick a player that I expect to go later in the mock. So that was why I picked Inez Cooper there. May have not been my smartest decision, but okay. So the Dolphins just took Monroe Freeling. This is a player that's already announced that he's going back to school. I believe he's in the transfer portal, yet he went in the Discord mock. So, but I believe I have already removed Monroe Freeling from the Draft Professor simulator because he's announced that he is going back to school. So. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so Randy, I'm with you. Let's go back to Overton. Yeah, so if he goes day 2, it's going to be round 3, and there's a no man's land in the edge class Right. So meaning that we're in the top 50 of this mock here. And if we look at the edge board, um, Romello Height, R. Mason Thomas, Joshua Josephs at the top of the board are not everybody's edge, right? So I think you like them for the Patriots. You like that small, bendier edge. Overton is the opposite body type of the top three edges on the PFF board right now, right? So then Akis, Young, I thought Lucas went back to school. Mesidor, Moore, Sutton are bigger body types like Overton. So if we're talking about edges and we have to compare LT Overton, I would be comparing him to Danny Dennis Sutton, Derek Moore, Akeem Mesidor, Anthony Lucas, Zion Young, based upon body type, right? Because some teams are only going to want that 280 to 270, or I should say the 260 to 275 pound edge. So, if you're going to use Overton as either, like if you're Pittsburgh and you run an odd front, Overton would be a great pick in round 3 for a team like Pittsburgh because they could use him in a couple different ways. I also think he'd be a great Eagle. I think the Eagles would love LT Overton as one of their defensive ends because they have a lot of odd fronts in the Fangio defense. Whereas if you're a 4-3 team, KC, in my opinion, runs a lot of even fronts, but I only know that really from my vantage as a Bills fan watching them play against the Chiefs. I don't know that Overton fits what, the Chiefs people on this channel would include Price Carter and they would include Chris Connor. And I don't know that that's a player that I've heard either of them discussing that's within their archetypes for the Chiefs. So. Okay, so this Jets pick is coming into the Jets. This is their last pick, but they've done Cisse. They've done David Bailey, and they got Dante Moore. So Dante Moore, David Bailey, Brandon Cisse. I think the defensive tackle board here right now looks actually pretty good. And then went wide receiver Chris Brazel. So we are at this point about halfway through the mock. So I believe there's 100 picks in the first 3 rounds, and we are at pick 44. So for those that have stuck with me through the first 44 picks, thank you very much. If you're just joining us, this mock draft is from the Reddit group. So there's a group of people that cover the NFL draft for Reddit. I've been invited to draft for the Bills in their mock. So they communicate a lot on Discord. So one of the windows I have up is the Discord where they're posting the picks. And then I have the PFF simulator up to keep track of them. I needed some way to keep track of who was on or off the board for when I make my pick. So I've decided to use this simulator to do it. I love Mesidor to the Ravens. I don't know if I love Mesidor to the Ravens in round 3, if that makes any sense. So Mesidor, and you're going to hear this a lot this draft season. So he had first round film. I remember a couple draft professors, Newton Owen, covering Mesidor, and they're like, okay, first round grade. They're like, that's first round film. He's the edge opposite Ruben Bay. And then first round film, and then you got to dig into the background a little bit. So Mesidor's had some injury history. Mesidor is an older prospect. I believe he's 24 now, and he'll be 25 when he goes into his rookie year. So it's one of those things is that you're basically getting Mesidor for, 4, maybe 6 years, but this isn't – NFL teams tend to like 21-year-old prospects more than 24 or 25-year-old prospects. So we'll see. It wouldn't surprise me to see Mesidor go this high. I just think I would wait until round 3 for an older prospect. That's the Jim draft philosophy There's not necessarily a lot of data behind it. That's just what I think I would do. Brandon Beane of Buffalo tends to like younger players, especially in round one. He drafted Brandon Beane drafted Tremaine Edmonds, and I think Edmonds was only 19 years old when he was drafted in round one. When you're spending high draft cap around 1 and 2, you want those players to be around longer. It's just you're going to increase your probability of success as a general manager. Okay, so Jake Golday to the Buccaneers in round 2. So again, another pick I like. So when draft professors did Golday, most of the draft professors said round 3. Now Owen and Randall did some linebackers last Tuesday, and they could see Golday round 2. This is an interesting player. So Golday, the linebacker from Cincinnati, last year when he played for Cincinnati, so 2024, he played slot defender. So he's like 6'4", 230 pounds, but he was playing slot. Now this year he's moved. He still played some slot for Cincinnati, and you can see reps of him covering wide receivers downfield. So he has some coverage ability to him that you're going to absolutely love in the linebacker room. So definitely Buccaneers need linebacker help. I could definitely see that. And then Lee Hunter. I don't have a filter set. So the player that's probably surprised me the most that they're dropping right now. Whoops. Was there a trade I missed? So I had Lee Hunter going to the Colts as the next pick. Did I miss? That's trade's not today. So the draft order they're using is different because they had the Jags picking here and the simulator had the Colts. So we'll see what ends up happening. Okay, and the Dolphins want Keith Abney. The Dolphins are not the next one on the draft. I'm curious where they're getting their draft order from because they're saying the Dolphins are selecting. So I will do a trade and move the Dolphins up. Miami. There we go. So we have Miami. So Miami. Okay, so Miami's on the clock, and Miami will draft Abney. So curious how Miami got that pick. I didn't see a trade announced here, but I'm going with what they announced. The Vikings are on the clock. They do AJ Halsey. I could see this. I have done AJ Halsey to the Vikings in round 2 before. I've done AJ Halsey to the Vikings in round 3 before. Harrison Smith, Vikings safety, is at the end of his career. This was a great safety class. AJ Halsey is a safety that comps, box safety. He's a big guy. He's going to be able to tackle. He's not necessarily the safety that you want if you're doing some single high, but definitely a great box safety. I've seen him go to Minnesota in numerous mocks. This one's no different. I really like that pick. Yeah, because I definitely missed D. Betzel. Yeah, I definitely missed pick 47 because that's supposed to be the Jags pick, but I didn't see a trade announced. But that's all right. I'm just doing this so I can keep track of the players I need for my pick. And, I got my guy Randy, my guy JT, and my guy, Halil, where was Halil? Right here, giving me their comments in the chat. So some of the Draft Professor podcasters are also checking in on this, giving me their comments in the chat. So appreciate you stopping by as well. And D. Betzel, if you wanted to come on the podcast, I can send you a link. Happy to have people here to talk to. So okay, Romello Height to the Eagles. I could see that. Oh, that was to the Eagles. Whoops. Okay, he's off the board. So at this point, I will make sure that the players are right to the pick, but there were definitely some trades that I missed. So what's funny is that in this mock, the Jaguars traded with the Colts, and that's a trade that's never going to actually happen, right? You don't do, I mean, it would take a lot to do an interdivision trade. But, you know, different people doing it different ways. I do find that one to be funny, but yep. And then, yep. So I will be, let's see. So I've got this many picks. Okay. So let's look at the board here. So if I'm Buffalo with 5 picks upcoming, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 6 picks upcoming. So if I had to pick 6 players for Buffalo, Caleb Banks, definitely. Chris Bell, definitely. Zion Young, definitely. Deontay Lawson, maybe. Kamari Ramsey, maybe. Josiah Trotter, definitely. So I would do Josiah Trotter, Kamari Ramsey, Zion Young, Chris Bell, Elijah Surratt, Caleb Banks would be my 6. So the Titans ended up selecting Inez Cooper. That's funny. I didn't think Inez Cooper would go in round 2. So I'll have to give them another interior offensive lineman. So Inez Cooper went to the Titans. So we've covered Inez Cooper on this channel. 5 different people have covered him. He's a draftable grade day 3. And then Anthony Russo said, but maybe Jim Harbaugh takes him in round 3. So he's definitely kind of the type of offensive lineman that's kind of like a bully. So if you're looking for vertical displacement, great player, but there are so many interior offensive linemen that I would have graded higher. So Connor Lew graded higher, Keelan Rutledge graded higher, Logan Jones graded higher, Josh Thompson significantly higher than what PFF has here. And I'm guessing that Mo must have announced he was returning to school because he's not in this simulator. And then Cage Casey also available, and he's probably on the tackle list. Yeah. So again, Randy, I think, you know, rounds 5 and 6 are the sweet spot. And one of the things you have to ask yourself about a player, if you're drafting them in rounds 1 through 3, when are they going to start? Always ask that question. So if I'm looking here, right? So the Steelers here, they went with Zachariah Branch. So I like the pick because, and this is just any random player that we talk about, right? Caleb Banks is going to get snaps for the Packers. Romello Height's going to get snaps for the Lions. AJ Hulsey is probably starting for the Vikings within 2 seasons, if not sooner, depending upon Harrison Smith. Keith Abney is going to be starting almost immediately for Miami. Lee Hunter, this is a Jags pick, but would be starting almost immediately for the Jags, right? So if you're spending a round 2 pick on a player, you want them to start. So if we're talking about Inez Cooper, there was nothing on the scouting report that says he's starting year 1, right? Listen to Jerry Ostrowski cover him. Listen to Owen. Listen to Drew Collins. Listen to Anthony Russo. All 4 people covered Cooper, and there's none of them said he's starting year 1 in the NFL. He has to work on some things. Now, there was something there that Anthony Russo said, Jim Harbaugh may like him in round 3 just because he's like that kind of player. He fits it. But that doesn't mean that he's starting for the Chargers. It just means the Chargers may really like him, right? That kind of thing. So, take that for what it's worth. But yeah, so Branch, you can see PFF, he's not even a top 100 player here. I think there's a lot of discussion on Zachariah Branch. First of all, I think PFF has him too low. Second, this is an electric player. So Zachariah Branch was comped to Tyreek Hill when he was in high school. So the Lions take Kenyatta Jackson. So it's 55 Buffalo. Okay. So I got to put my pick in. Okay. So Kenyatta Jackson. Not sure if Kenyatta Jackson. So the Cardinals took Ihinokor. Now this is interesting because the Chargers took a tackle when the Chargers have one of the best offensive tackle situations in the league. So I think some people might just be drafting their favorite players. I don't know that Ihinokor to the Chargers is something that I've seen before. So some people like the Trotter pick, some people don't. I think linebacker for Buffalo is a huge need. So they're disagreeing with the need in the chat. So here's my logic there. So Buffalo is losing Matt Milano to free agency. So his contract is expiring. So Shaq Thompson, who's another linebacker, is on a 1-year deal. So Thompson's probably going to get re-upped. So that would mean that when we draft Trotter in round 2, he doesn't need to start unless we do a 3 linebacker alignment. But Buffalo needs a linebacker, and it's going to happen in rounds 2 or 3. So this was Orange. Went off the board. And then Moten went off the board. I love the Ahmad Moten. And they don't even have Ahmad Moten in their simulator. He must have announced these. Well, but Miami's still in the playoff, so I have to pick a defensive lineman to put in the place here, and we'll just go Demonic Williams. Okay, so at 59, it was Genesis Smith. So there's definitely, it's interesting, right? Because these are people that don't necessarily come on podcasts where we talk about which players we like or whichever, right? So it is fascinating to see other people. So Kamari Ramsey is off the board at pick 60. And so this is about the range for Ramsey. So Ramsey was on the short list for who I would have picked for Buffalo at 56 as well. So Kamari Ramsey or Josiah Trotter at 56. Love either of those players there. I know Sam Teets, draft professor, had Ramsey going to Buffalo at pick 56 in one of the mock drafts in his Substack. So, shout out to Sam there. But I know that the Jaguars need a safety. That's a great pick and that's also the Jags' first pick of this draft. So definitely love that one. Rams come in, they get their tackle in Tiernan. Okay, and then the Patriots on the clock here. Where the Patriots did wide receiver. I think they did Concepcion earlier. Okay, so they went with is Johnson in this simulator. Yeah, so they went with Jamari Johnson in this because he hasn't said that he's not going back. So we just have to pick a tight end to be named later. So I'm going to go Marlon Klein. So I definitely like the tight end to the Patriots. Jamari Johnson, who they took on the Discord, has not declared for the draft. Oregon lost yesterday. So I know that their players have a little bit of time to declare. I don't think he declares. I would be surprised. And while all of us just want to see the players play pro football, one of the things that I've discovered recently is, these players, I think playing college football, players look like they're having more fun. And if you want to win a national title, you have more control over your college winning a national title than you do over your NFL team winning a Super Bowl, because you get to pick what college you go to, right? College is free agency. Players can go play for any college. Yeah, and Randy, I get, but you're not fixing a team in season. You're looking at them at the off season, right? And if you see that you have two franchise tackles, don't spend a premium pick on another tackle. That's just not good team building. So I completely agree, but getting insurance, you get your insurance on day 3, right? So if you look at Buffalo's offensive tackle room, and I would say the only team that could compete with Buffalo for the best offensive tackle room is the Chargers. Okay? So how did Buffalo build it? They spent a round 2 pick on Deion Dawkins and a round 3 pick on Spencer Brown. Then we take flyers on day 3 on offensive linemen. Some of those offensive linemen haven't panned out. And you don't even know about them because they're not in the league anymore. But like the year we drafted Spencer Brown, we drafted, I believe it was Tommy Doyle, for example, right? Okay, so but Doyle plays in the league 3 years, gets hurt, has to retire. But then Buffalo spends a late round pick on a Chase Lunt and a late round pick on Tylen Grable. and we have an undrafted free agent in Ryan Vandemark, right? So you make sure that you have good offensive line coaches and you draft backups that are projects, right? And like Vandemark specifically spent time in Buffalo's practice squad before he got promoted to the active roster. So in a mock like this, where the Chargers ended up taking a tackle in round 2, I just don't see it happening. Just don't see it happening. So pick 63 is Skylar Bell. And then pick 4 is Surratt. This is the latest I've seen Elijah Surratt go in a mock. He lasted all the way to pick 64. Definitely like Emmanuel McNeil-Warren going at pick 65. I tend to see him go more towards pick 50, but the difference between 50 and 65, not huge, right? So like that here, okay. And picks coming in fast and furious. So we have Will Lee going to the Titans. And the teams that I'm showing here may not be correct. I'm going to make sure that I get the right player at the right pick number. But there's been a lot of trades and bouncing from thread to thread about trades, not easy for me to do bookkeeping. Yeah, Marina, I remember now. You see, now I remember you. Right, because you and me have gone back and forth on the YouTube. So the Eagles in this mock have taken Jackson, and Fano. So Kenyatta Jackson, I think, goes back to school. So I don't think he's in this draft anyway. But again, I don't have any control over what the Eagles do. But I do think the Eagles go edge. The question would be, are they trying to get, because in a Fangio defense, you have like a nose tackle, and then you have like 2 edges that have to play 5 technique. But the edges that play a 5 tech and the edges that play a 7 and a 9 are not the same body type, right? So the Eagles could take an edge of either type. But the ones that get paid the millions of dollars are going to be the ones that play the 7 and the 9 and can rush from the edge and bend around the edge. Okay, so Keontae Scott went to the Raiders. Love this pick. This is about where I see Keontae Scott go. There are some draft professors that like Keontae Scott in the top 50. Specifically, Keontae Scott as a Chiefs second-round pick would not surprise me. Chris Johnson lasted till round 3. I know that could get some draft professors in a bunch because we see Chris Johnson going in round 1. So the fact that he lasts until round 3, this is we're early in the draft cycle. I think Chris Johnson goes a lot higher than this in the real draft. Okay, so we have how many picks until mine? I still have like 10 picks to go, so I don't have to start counting my players yet. Okay, so I like this. So Jadarian Price went to the Texans. Texans definitely need to add to the running back room. So definitely like Jadarian Price. One thing I notice is that running backs fall in mock drafts more than they fall in the real draft. But like Emmett Johnson is still on the board here. Now Pons to Cleveland is interesting. Andrew Berry doesn't typically draft players that would be, let's say, outliers. Now, D'Angelo Pons is a really good player, but his arm length and size is going to be an outlier. The Browns are not typically a team that would draft a player like that. So he might be there on somebody's board. Part of what gets me involved in the draft is I like to be able to begin to learn how specific teams draft. So we have several Browns draft professors. They talk about, the Browns like to draft young players. Andrew Berry likes to draft young players. So the Browns would not be a team that, for example, would draft Akeem Mesidor because he's older. Keontae Scott is older. So they're probably not going to draft players like that, even if they're graded this high. So there's an interesting discussion to be had there. So this is the Commanders' second pick of this draft. So the Commanders do not have a lot of draft capital. They have a round 1, they have a round 3, and they have a round 5. So they have 3 picks in the first 5 rounds. So another candidate for a team to trade back. If they can pick up extra picks, I'm sure that would help them. And this would be an example of why it's dangerous to trade draft picks. Because, the Commanders went to the NFC title game last year. And now they're drafting in the top 10, but they've traded away a lot of draft capital to try to keep their roster where it was and return to the NFC Championship game. And you have to recognize when is the right time as a team to borrow from your future to pay for your present. So if you're a new head coach, I wouldn't borrow from my future. Now, if you're a coach and you're on the hot seat, borrow from your future, because if you don't win, it's going to be another new head coach's problem of the lack of draft capital. And like Miami would be a great example of that. So Anthony Lucas, I thought I saw that Lucas went back to school. I'm going to have to go double check that. Yeah, so Randy, kind of the same thing, right? So the Colts trading the first round picks for Sauce Gardner. They were all in, and like going all in on Daniel Jones is part of what got Brian Daboll fired, right? You have to know you have to be able to objectively look at the status of your team. Now, at the time that the Colts traded for Sauce Gardner, they were in first place. Their biggest hole was at corner. So I get the pick, I should say I get the trade. But then as soon as you don't make the playoffs, that looks suspicious, if that makes sense. So so we're definitely getting to where, like, for Buffalo, I'm probably going between edge and safety as the next pick. But at the same time, if Chris Bell is there, Chris Bell is done dropping, right? He is a first round grade. He should be coming off the board like this is a Kansas City Chief. But no, they went, okay, so somebody went with a different player, but it's like sooner or later, draft good players, right? Draft good players and then solve the rest of your roster later. So yeah, like I'll take Chris Bell to Buffalo all day, every day, if he's available. Yep. So Zion Young win. Some draft professors have a first round grade on Zion Young. So there's some character concerns. So he will probably drop in the draft because of the character concerns. But getting Zion Young in round 3, that's an awesome pick for whoever made that pick. So love the player, love the profile. I think he's going to go a lot higher than this in the draft, especially with the no man's land of edges. So once the top edges are off the board, most people are saying they like the round 3 edge better than the round 2 edge. So if you're staring at round 2 and you don't like the board and your team needs an edge, I think that's Zion Young in the real draft. Yep. So Marina, hey, thanks for stopping by. And I definitely look forward to our constant Eagles debates. And I love your commentary on every Eagles mock. Even if I don't agree with your take, I agree that you stick to your principles and you give your takes every single time you see an Eagles mock draft on this channel. So, and if you wanted to come on a podcast with EJ, who's one of the draft professors that does Eagles content with us, I can put you, EJ, and me on a podcast, and we can talk about Eagles the entire podcast. So Bryce Lance went to the Falcons, so that's technically a Falcons pick, but there were some trades that I haven't been tracking. So Pittsburgh just took Chris Bell. So that's great value getting Chris Bell in round 3. The way I always like to talk about like injured players like this. So I don't know that Mike Tomlin being on a hot seat would take Chris Bell. Usually when you have a player that's dropping with an injury like this, so this is Chris Bell is a highly rated player, was getting first round grades before he tore his ACL. So if you're drafting a player that's probably going to miss training camp, you want to be a head coach with job security and a GM with job security. Both things need to be true. So like he would be a perfect Kansas City Chief because Reed's not going anywhere. Veach isn't going anywhere, right? Right. So they can wait a year for the player, right? The same way that Dallas, when they drafted Revel last year, they weren't going to fire Schottenheimer after one season. So they have a season to wait. And obviously Jerry Jones isn't going to fire himself as the Cowboys GM either, right? So you have a year to wait, right? The player can recover from their injury. But if you're like a coach on the hot seat, I don't know that you can afford to take Chris Bell and wait a year. R. Mason Thomas, love it to the Buccaneers in round 3. Jaguars went Devin Moore. Okay, so how many more picks do I have? I'm at 88. We're at 78. So I'm not ready to count 10 players. I don't have that many fingers. I try to count 5. So right now my short list would be Wheatley, and Husky, but okay, and they have Husky really far down. So Wheatley and Husky. If I look at the edge room, I like Akis. I like Moore. I like Barham. I like Lawrence. Malachi Lawrence, being able to talk about him in round 3, I probably will. So like I do think Buffalo needs a safety, but we're, from a roster standpoint right now, Bosa is a free agent. Epinesa is a free agent. So Buffalo's going to be down 2 of their top 3 edges at the end of the season, right? So basically the only starting edge that's under contract is Rousseau, who just got extended. Good for him. Okay, and then we have Javon Solomon. So I do think that edge right now looks like a need, but Brandon Beane being Brandon Beane, you see, and somebody just took Oscar Delp to the Falcons. They really did that. Like, if there's one position the Falcons don't draft, it's tight end. Now, maybe they let Kyle Pitts go, but I don't see it. So, like Delp, this is the range that Delp should be drafted in. So I don't disagree with the value, but why would the Falcons draft a tight end when I know that they need corner and they need receiver? And I think from talking with Clint, specifically Clint Goss, who's a draft professor, who's a huge Falcons fan, I would think wide receiver, but the Falcons drafted wide receiver earlier in the draft, so they got the position they needed there. But I believe they still need a boundary corner, and I believe they need a linebacker. Now, granted, the linebacker board doesn't look too good right now. So a couple of different directions they could go there. So Piper. Okay, so the Ravens ended up taking another offensive lineman that's not on the PFF simulator. So they took Cade Piper from Iowa. I have Piper as a return to school. I think he's technically draft eligible, but all indications are he's going back to school. So I'm just going to go pick different linemen to put in his place as a placeholder. Okay. So Omar Cooper Jr. went in this mock. That's a Colts pick. There was a trade between the Colts and the Jaguars, which I haven't put into this simulator. That's a good range for Cooper. See him definitely as a day 2 player, whether that's round 2, day 2, or round 3, day 2. I think there's still a little bit of evaluation and discussion we want to have as to should his range be higher. But you saw him play in the semifinal game last night. I mean, he had a touchdown catch. Great game. I mean, that entire Indiana team looks unstoppable. So, JT, that's interesting because I thought when I spoke with Andrew Harbaugh that he was looking at edge as like one of the top 2 or 3 needs. I think now maybe R. Mason Thomas is edge 5 or 6 because you can't use him in every down. Maybe that's the difference. But I thought from talking with Andrew that edge was a high need for the Buccaneers. So, JT, what do you think the Buccaneers' needs are? Okay, so the Vikings took Coleman. And then the Titans took Lawrence. Okay, so now I have to find 3 players I like. Akis, or I should say 5 players I like. So I like Akis. Moore. So Buffalo has scouted Michigan a lot. Derek Moore here to Buffalo. Moore feels like he is the size that Buffalo's edges are. So, like, if we were to look at the edge board right now, right? Joshua Josephs is not a Buffalo Bills style edge. Akis definitely is. Moore definitely is. Dennis Sutton definitely is. Kamara to a lesser degree. Tyreek Sapp is the body size Buffalo likes. Draft professors, we like Jayshon Barham to Buffalo specifically to play like a Michael Hoyt type role. So all those guys would be edges I would consider. And I'm essentially weighing that against the safety board, right? So Buffalo, in my opinion, needs a safety to put opposite of Cole Bishop, right? We're getting by with Jordan Poyer right now. So Buffalo investing in safety in rounds 2, 3, or 4 to me is a definite. There's even a chance Buffalo would go Dylan Thieneman in round 1. That's not my favorite mock to do, but Buffalo getting Thieneman in round 1 would not surprise me at all. Okay, so this one was Miller. I don't think Brian Maffey, one of our draft professors that does Packers, I don't know that Miller's measurements meet the way that he predicts, the way that Brian predicts Packers picks. Okay, so we've got 3 picks. So what would I do if I'm Buffalo? Let's look at the safety board. Wheatley is there. So is Husky. And I'm probably going to go with Wheatley if he's available. Okay, Steelers went with Rodriguez. I love that pick. So Rodriguez, we've covered him on the channel numerous times. I want to give a shout out to James Foster, Sam Teets, Anthony Russo, and EJ Holt, which did the scouting report on Jacob Rodriguez. So Rodriguez has some athletic limitations. So this feels like some people like him higher. Dale from Bengals and Brews likes him higher. And then there were a few other people that came on and they said they would take Rodriguez in round 2 if the board didn't go their way. So the advantage of drafting Rodriguez is you're getting an instinctual linebacker, and he has a significant amount of forced fumbles. And you don't want to be you don't want to underestimate that, right? Because if you can generate turnovers, that's a plus player. So they went Igbinosun, so I got to make sure that my pick is in. It should be Wheatley. Okay, so Buffalo came out of this draft with Boston, Trotter, and Wheatley. And I like that. So we get a safety. We could use Wheatley a couple different ways, but Wheatley has the athleticism to let Bishop play in the box. Husky also does. So I would have been happy with either Husky or Wheatley. Here is this pick for Buffalo. Overall, what I like about this mock is I've addressed what I consider to be the 3 most pressing roster needs as far as getting younger contracts on the team. So part of my draft strategy when I look to do an exercise like this is what rooms does Buffalo need cheaper contracts in? And I would definitely say safety. So, for example, Tyler Rapp is on his 2nd contract, right? Jordan Poyer is on way more than his 3rd contract, right? So when you have players who are not on their 1st contract, their cost is higher. Even though Poyer is probably playing for the league minimum, his contract is still higher than a rookie. So not only do we need to improve the performance of the position, we also want to get younger, right? So between, Poyer, DeMar Hamlin, those are expiring contracts. I don't want Rapp to be a starting safety, right? So, I'm okay if Tyler Rapp is like safety 3 or safety 4 for Buffalo. I'm completely okay with that, right? I don't want Rapp to be the starter. But if we're basically saying that Rapp has to beat out Zakee Wheatley from Penn State, I would love that to be a training camp battle, right? And then this is Lou. So 49ers need a center. Connor Lew or Logan Jones would have been my picks there for the 49ers. Actually, Parker Brailsford may also be an option there too for the 49ers. I definitely love the 49ers going center. They need to address center early in the draft. They have some veterans offensive linemen on that team that are going to be aging out of their contracts. So the same logic I was giving for Buffalo. If you look at, which teams are keeping, 30-plus-year-old players in their starting lineup, you should spend a day 2 draft pick on any position that you have a 30-year-old starter. Like, that's just good roster construction to me. You're investing a premium pick. Round 1, 2, and 3 to me are premium picks on any position that you have an expected retirement within a year. So I love drafting like that. That's a great way to look at a draft strategy. So what I try to do is that if you know that you have a free agent leaving next year, so if you have a 2027 free agent, you spend around 4 or 5 pick on that position this year, right? So great example. Buffalo knew AJ Epinesa was leaving this year, right? That we know that this is last year of Epenesa's contract. We drafted Landon Jackson last year, right? So, okay, Landon Jackson hasn't played much, but at minimum, you have a player with upside as his backup. You still need to address the position, but the hole isn't as big as you think it is because you've invested a draft pick the previous year. The same way that we drafted both TJ Sanders and Deion Walker when we know that Daquan Jones' contract is expiring at the end of this season, right? So we hedged that bet twice. We drafted 2 defensive tackles last year because we have a defensive tackle that's contract is expired. Yeah, so defensive tackle was also a weakness, and we knew that we had to address it just because the depth on the roster was weak. And one of the reasons that Buffalo may have double dipped is because you know that Daquan Jones is probably not going to be offered another contract. That's a great way to build a roster because if you do that, you have 4-year windows which keep renewing, right? Because you're always trying to replace the players that are leaving in free agency with draft picks. And you're going to see some podcasts on Draft Professor in the coming weeks where we actually analyze that, like how are teams replacing their players, because that's a really good draft strategy. And like Marina, who's in the chat here for an Eagles fan, she's a very loyal follower, Draft Professor. Her and I go back and forth in the Eagles. But what makes Howie Roseman such a good drafter is that he does tend to draft a year ahead. The Eagles have Lane Johnson starting at tackle, but he's probably going to retire soon. So we know that the Eagles are going to use premium position or a premium pick on a premium position. That's Howie Roseman draft trend. And then he'll address tackle so that he has a project behind Lane Johnson, right? This doesn't need to be a tackle that starts immediately, but it needs to be a tackle that fits what the Eagles do. Like I like Max Iheanacore as a project tackle to the Eagles. That's a player that's like in the back of my mind. When I heard the scouting report, I was like, okay, this is a tackle who's a ball of clay. He's had some really good reps against David Bailey and Romello Height of Texas Tech, who are some of the best edge rushers in the class. So he has some good tape against some really good players. He just needs time. So, okay, so the next pick was Akis. Akis went to the Colts. This is a Colts pick. Akis meets the athletic thresholds that the Colts tend to draft with. So I really like that pick. Jake Slaughter went to the Rams. Again, getting offensive line depth. They went corner back-to-back in round 1. I don't think they've addressed quarterback yet. But I think the Rams overall here are having a really solid draft. Yeah, so some of the people in the chat are also commenting about there's people in this mock because everything's being done on spreadsheets. They're not using I tend to validate the Draft Professor list as often as I can to try to make sure that I have the right player. So like here's another one. So Carter Smith of Indiana went to the Patriots. So Carter Smith, first of all, this is a really good pick, except Carter Smith is probably returning to school, right? So Carter Smith is an underclassman. I would bet money that he returns to Indiana. If Carter Smith is in this draft, he is going to go 50 spots higher. he will probably be the fourth, fifth, or sixth offensive tackle off the board. Well, and in fairness, Randy, like when I do the 7-round mock for draft professors at the end of the year, right now I'm using a spreadsheet. I am trying to get my simulator programmed so 32 people can log in and make picks into the same mock. But that is proving to be a daunting effort with my developers. So we have 5 picks. Well, and I don't know that they're using comp picks because I've seen some discussion. You can see in the PFF simulator, they've got the comp picks. If this mock doesn't do the comp picks, I will do my best available to each team. Well, so Randy, so here's the thing. So yeah, you're right. He would win a national championship. The issue is, so Carter Smith right now is projecting to be one of the best offensive tackles in the draft, but that doesn't mean he's projecting to be one of the best offensive tackles in the NFL. So ask yourself this from like what you would do as a player. The NIL money for offensive linemen is through the roof. So Smith, it's not a money issue, right? So if Smith goes in round 2, he's probably going to get about $8 million guaranteed over 4 years, right? That's about what a second round contract is. So the players in round 1, like Cam Ward, I think last year got $40 million guaranteed over 4 years. And then the last pick of round 1, I want to say it was like $20 million over 4 years was the guarantee. And it drops down to be like 16 to 8 million guaranteed over 4 years for a second round pick. So if I'm Carter Smith and I'm looking at $8 million guaranteed over 4 years as a second round pick, but if I return to school, I may be able to up that to 16 to 25 million guaranteed over 4 years. I actually think it's a better move for Smith to go back to school, both financially as well as ego. He can still get better. So even though he would be drafted in rounds 1 or 2, if he comes out this year, he's going to go even higher if he comes out next year. So I, from the player's perspective, I won't fault him for declaring, but I think he returns to school. Okay, so do I not? Okay, so apparently PFF does not have the Notre Dame offensive lineman Charles Jagusa. And actually, the reason why PFF doesn't have him is Jagusa returned to school. There were 2 other Notre Dame offensive linemen that declared. Okay, so they are doing the comp picks. I have to do another interior offensive lineman. So Keelan Rutledge should be picked over some of these offensive linemen that are returning to school. Solid day 2 grade on him. Logan Jones, Parker Brailsford going here in the late 3rd. I'm going to go Carmona for that pick just to get somebody off the board. And then the next player to the Vikings, they went with a tight end, which is Max Clare. Love Clare here in round 3. And like, so seeing like Jennings Dunker still available in the mock surprises me. Michael Trigg still being here is interesting. Not everybody is a Michael Trigg believer, though. So I understand the volatility, but there's definitely a lot of people that like Michael Trigg, and I would expect Michael Trigg to go on day 2 of the NFL draft because there's going to be one team that likes him. Derek Moore, I was considering for Buffalo's round 3 pick. It's cool to see Prongos here. I think Prongos goes back to school. LJ Martin announced he was returning to school. Emmett Johnson, for some people, is RB2. We've already seen 3 running backs go in this mock, and none of them was Emmett Johnson. Julian Neal still being here at the end of round 3. I feel like he's one of the best available players right now. Darrell Jackson Jr., defensive lineman from Florida State. So some people really like him, like Jack Brentnall has him top 50. Then there's a lot of other people that have him day 3. Isaiah World, like, okay, that would be like the pick in place of Carter Smith here. great project tackle. You have a round 1 traits with round 3 film, or I should say, round 1 traits with day 3 film. Okay, so this is a Lions pick. They picked Malik Muhammad, corner from Texas. Steelers selected Rutledge. And then the Mr. Irrelevant of this mock is coming up soon. So while they're bringing in that pick, so let's go through the board here. Okay, quarterback. Klubnik, I think, goes day 2. I think a QB needing team is going to look at him. Okay, so Jacoby Lane definitely has day 2 traits as a wide receiver. CJ Daniels has some injury issues, which is probably why he's falling. Antonio Williams seems to be going in round 2. Like Sam Teets has him going in round 2 of a lot of his mocks, and he's still here at pick 100. Malachi Fields has some round 3 love from the draft professors, and that looks about right for wide receiver. Okay, so let's go tight end, and let's turn off wide receiver and turn off corner. So tight end, Trigg is like the only player here where I definitely see I'm surprised that he lasted to the end of round 3. Running back, we went through a little bit about Emmett Johnson. But running back, I would expect Emmett Johnson to go. Katron Allen may go day 2. Justice Haynes just announced he went back to school. Mike Washington could be going day 2. And we just covered some of those running backs because they're going to the Senior Bowl. So you can hear EJ talking about them on a podcast we did last week. So offensive tackles. So there's one player specific. Well, okay, Dunker is probably a guard at the NFL level. Surprised Dunker didn't go. Isaiah World, surprised he didn't go. You may not like his film, but traits like his get drafted on day 1 or 2. So I think he would go. Brian Parker, the fact that he didn't go really surprises me. I know Jerry Ostrowski and Owen really like Brian Parker. It wouldn't surprise me to see Parker go at the end of round 1, and he's still here at the end of round 3. Jude Bowery is a name I think we're going to hear more of. He's going to start being pushed up boards. Draft professors are already grading him as a day 2 offensive tackle. He has all the measurables. So I think that's a player that will go earlier. Cage Casey, I think, should be getting some top 100 vibe. Okay, so let's take a look at who else is left. Interior offensive line. Logan Jones was pick 100. So I could see that. And then Joshua Braun was somebody that, and Josh Thompson, those 2 guys are probably going to go, like they're going to be like the best available in round 4. They're interior linemen, so it makes sense as to why they didn't go. Okay, corners. Julian Neal, I think, is the best available player, according to Draft Professor Podcast. Jalen Kilgore being available. Like if I'm Buffalo, I'm trading up for Kilgore at the top of round 4. Based upon roster needs, even though I didn't draft an edge, and there's some edges I like, Kilgore would be a great chess piece because he could play boundary corner, he could play slot corner, he could play safety. One draft professor even says he looks more like a linebacker. So he would be, at minimum, he would get on the field anytime we went to dime coverage. So if you draft a round 4 player and you get like a dime player the rookie year out of that, great. And then if, injuries hit the secondary all the time, he would give a lot of flexibility as to how do you use Jordan Hancock and how do you use Jalen Kilgore, because he could replace Teron Johnson, right? So Buffalo has Hancock right now on the depth chart. Next year, Hancock is probably going to be the fifth or sixth defensive back, right? So fifth would be a starter. The sixth would be the first guy off the bench. Kilgore would just add to that depth, and you could use Kilgore and Hancock interchangeably. You could find ways to put them both in the field at the same time. So I would love to see Buffalo get Kilgore, and he was still there at the end of round 3. Okay, Terry Moore from Duke is probably going to go in round 6 or 7. He's been injured all year. We think he's going back to school and he's going to play a year healthy. But if he's in the draft, you want your team to grab him in round 6 or 7. He didn't play all year. He's got an injury. But when we covered him in the summer, he was generally one of the top 5 safeties in the class. So unfortunate for him. I would also like to point out Jalen Husky of Maryland. We have a day 2 grade on at the Draft Professors. So he's a corner converted to safety. Would definitely like that pick. Okay, and then defensive lineman. Darrell Jackson Jr. is probably the best available. Like Tim Keenan is a 2-down nose tackle. Xavier Harris has some character issues. Zane Durant's probably not getting out of round 4. So do you play him at edge? Do you play him at defensive tackle? He's a 280-pound defensive tackle, but his traits through the roof, high character player coming out of the Penn State strength and conditioning program, would definitely love him as like an edge defensive tackle hybrid in round 4. Okay, what other players are still available? Edge. Josephs, Moore, Kamara, Sapp, Barham. Those are all edges I'm seeing going in round 3. Max Llewellyn did not get picked on day 2 of this mock draft. Okay, and then what other positions? Linebacker. I think linebacker got picked over pretty well. Yep. So for anybody that watched this 2-hour podcast, I want to say thank you from the Draft Professors. We're a group of 110 people that podcast in the NFL Draft. We're here at 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern every weekday. We do live mock drafts every Friday. So this was a mock draft I was participating in. I want to give a shout out to the account, which was emceeing it. So ML Brules from Discord, you ran a great mock. Thank you for letting me participate in it. I have a lot of fun when I do these. So the fact that you let me participate in yours for a day is truly appreciated by me. I will finish this mock. So the last pick was the Jaguars selecting Logan Jones. And truly appreciate it. We will see, is PFF going to grade this? So that was what the first round mock was. So it doesn't grade the picks. Okay, so I'm looking through here. I'm not as familiar with what the like capabilities are as far as grading. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for watching. And like I said, we're here 7 p.m., 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Thursday. Live mock drafts every Friday at 7. And we have shows on Saturday and Sunday. A week from tomorrow, Devin Jackson and Jack Brentnall are going to be starting a new show on Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. So those are two really good draft people. I'm interested to hear their feedback and comments on the draft class from now until April. So thank you for tuning in. Enjoy your evening, and we will see you on a podcast again tomorrow morning.